All right, Michael, let's take it from the top.
All right. Welcome back to the Common Sense Medicine podcast with your host, Dr. Timothy Chen. I'm your co-host, Michael Abernathy, and we are continuing our journey through the Foundation series on weight loss. And catch us up. Where were we last episode? Where are we going today?
Yeah. So last time, obviously, we have shifted now from the science of weight loss, the calories, the energy, and all these things to the mindset, right? And so last episode, we essentially focused on the 5%ers. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, a lot of people try to lose weight, but at the 3-year mark, only about 5% of people have actually succeeded in losing weight and then also keeping it off.
Right.
And so we really focused on some of the habits that they had to see if we can apply them also in our lives. But today we're also moving on, continuing in this aspect of the mindset.
Yeah. So like you said, last time we went through what are the 5%ers doing, and we touched on some of the things that they do. And for now, we're going to be going into some of those things in much more depth, mm-hmm. right? So we're going to be talking about social support, and we're going to get into environmental design and willpower and motivation and self-discipline. And we're going to talk about, habit building and what types of goals are better than others, and how to, different methods of incorporating new habits and breaking old habits. But today I figured, what better place to start than getting our mindset right?
Yeah.
And so, I wanted to talk first about a few, I call this section simple truths, mm-hmm. that I have written down. And the first one is that growth is an essential part of what being human is all about. So we should all be striving to become better in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. And the outcomes for growth, as far as, development personally, physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever, mm-hmm. growth is going to look different from one person to the next. And it's going to look different for one person across time. So,
right.
As you grow, you become better, but then your desire to grow in different areas might change. So just because you're getting better at this thing doesn't mean that that's, you're going to be stuck there. You might find other things that kind of roll into it. And I've experienced that in my life. Like, as I, focus on one area to improve in, that just kind of spills over. There's this spillover effect mm-hmm. That happens when you start working on yourself. In health care and getting healthier is no different. As you do healthy things, it leads to more healthy things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and again, I think this idea, we call it growth mindset, right?
Sure.
The idea that there's not a limit, like you can always improve, you can always get things better. And I like how you said that oftentimes when we focus on improving on one area, it will bleed into the other mm-hmm. ones, right? So it's like if people are like, I need to improve my sleep, because for I think most people, that one's the one that needs to be improved on. It will make your workouts better. And it'll make your appetite and your food choices better as well.
And it's one of the reasons that we focus so much through coaching on the smallest, easiest habits, because people have this misconception that you have to do really big, impactful, difficult changes, whole lifestyle overhauls. Mm-hmm. And that's not true. A lifestyle overhaul can be accomplished, but it doesn't have to be done right now. Mm-hmm. It can be done over time. And by adopting very small things that seem insignificant now, but being consistent with them, they lead into healthier things. And you just kind of snowball into that lifestyle change.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to start there.
Awesome.
So the second one is probably one that we all know, but we all still struggle with, is nobody is perfect, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Imperfection is exactly why growth is possible. If we were all perfect, life would kind of be boring.
Yeah.
Like, what would we do? We'd just exist. There's no reason to, one of the biggest things that we can do is aspire to greater things. And if we were all perfect, then we'd all just be doing nothing. We'd be doing stuff, but what would be the meaning behind it, the purpose?
Wow. And that's a really good mindset. Again, because I feel like what we've seen with patients and things like that is two people can come to the exact same situation, and how their mindset views it changes how they react, right? So mm-hmm. If their view is like, this thing is just a thing in my way and I'm stuck here forever, there's no way around it, then you're stuck. Mm-hmm. But if this challenge is something that allows you to grow, that maybe you are struggling with this, food or this eating habit or this this lack of exercise, this is now an opportunity for you to grow and improve in that area. So it's not really a hindrance. It's actually the imperfection, and not being good at it is not a hindrance. It's a chance for you to actually improve.
Right. And so if we can recognize those imperfections or what we would perceive as weaknesses, then it gives us kind of a direction of where we can go, because we know this is something we're weak in, then we can improve there.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into the next one, is that we need challenge. We need something to overcome. And just like our muscles, our brain requires a challenge to grow. And one of the things that a lot of people run into, especially in today's world, is everything is just kind of there and available to us. And we have this fear of a lot of different things, and failure being one of them. But, if we reject any kind of challenge in our lives and always seek comfort, your brain doesn't just sit there and just go, oh, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Your brain has parts that are built to overcome challenge. And if you don't give it a challenge to overcome, it will just start coming up with things to fight against. Right.
Yeah. This is actually huge. There was, I don't know if you remember reading about, but they tried to actually build a dome back in the day to try to see if we can have plant life in Mars. And this is gonna make sense in a minute, because you're like, oh, it's okay. And so anyway, they built this terror dome. This, I think, in the middle of Arizona. And what they wanted to do is they want to see if they can grow an entire environment inside this dome.
Was this that Pauly Shore movie, Biodome?
I think it probably came from that idea.
Okay.
But the interesting thing was they grew these trees, right? So these trees are growing, and they got huge, but they kept toppling over. So these gigantic trees would just keep falling, and people are like, why in the world are these trees falling? And what they realized was the wind that blows on trees forced the trees to dig their roots deeper. Okay. Right. So it's kind of like when the wind came, the tree realized, oh, I don't have enough support on this side, so I'm going to dig my roots deeper. So then, I'll be stronger on that side. Well, in the dome, there was no wind. And because there was no wind, the trees just grew straight up. They had no roots, and they just kept toppling over. Okay. So it's kind of like this concept that we need challenge, because it shows us what we're good at, but also where our deficiencies are and where we can improve. And again, if we don't have challenges, or we just run from them all the time, the next thing all we're going to do is just find problems and make
our brain is going to find threats in non-threatening situations, and we're all just going to be in fight or flight mode all the time, because everything is going to be perceived as a threat, because that's what your brain is trying to find.
Wow.
And so finally, in the simple truth section is growth and change are uncomfortable. So we're not, if you remember back when we were talking about the body, it doesn't care about optimal health. It doesn't care about good, bad, whatever. It cares about comfort, and it's always going to move back towards comfortable. And your brain is kind of the same way. And it's not because of a lack of intelligence or a lack of willpower or a lack of ability that we're held back from accomplishing change. It's because we don't like being uncomfortable.
Right.
And we'll avoid that discomfort, which will hold us back from actually changing, just because our default state is to always pursue comfort. And that's kind of bad, because the world that we live in is built on comfort.
Right.
So those are the challenges that we face.
Yeah.
Getting uncomfortable. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Well, yeah. And again, I think the take home message is this: none of this is to be feared or run away from, right? Like being uncomfortable, having challenges, looking at things like imperfections. The mindset shouldn't be that these are just problems, we got to run away from them. But these are things to embrace, because these are the things that it takes to make you better. Right. And so, I mean, we all realize it on some small level, right? From kids who are going to school, like if you want to get good grades, you kind of have to put some work in, and it sucks and it's not fun. But at the end of the day, if you don't do it, you're not going to get what you want.
Yeah. And there's this, so I've actually read multiple books that kind of approach this from different angles, but basically it's all the same. But there's the known is order, right? The unknown is chaos. The known is comfort. The unknown is discomfort. You know, the known is what you're good at and where you are, you're safe. And the unknown is, you know, it's dangerous there. But there's, you know, if you always operate in the known and you don't pursue something into the unknown and expand your boundaries a little bit, you're never going to make any kind of progress. So you kind of have to dip your toes into the unknown or into the uncomfortable or into the dangerous to make progress. And there's a concept in productivity and work called flow state. You familiar with flow state?
Yes, I am.
So tell me what flow state is.
So from what I understand, flow state is kind of in this state where things just go. So a lot of artists, a lot of writers, you know, they have this writer's block. They'll sit there and they can't get anything done, but they get to flow state and it's almost like they can sit there and also write half their book in like 4 hours. Yeah.
So flow state means your brain just kind of tunnels in and just starts to go and things come out naturally. It doesn't feel forced. And there's actually been studies on how much of a challenge is required to like stimulate flow state. So it can't be too easy, because if it's too easy, you'll get bored. It can't be too difficult, because if it's too difficult, you'll get frustrated and quit. But it has to be a little bit higher than your comfort level. And that number is about 4%.
Okay.
So if you operate at a difficulty of about 4% over what your maximum, you know, capabilities are, that's kind of the optimal place for flow state to kick in, because you're challenged enough, but it's not so difficult that you can't figure it out and it just kind of drives you, right? So when you think about that, 4% is not that much.
Right.
And again, it comes back to the little things that make such a big difference. Because, you know, if you're operating at 4% above your capacity, but you can pump out like days worth of work in a couple hours because you're just feeling it, you know, think about how that can apply to behavioral change, where you can do 4% higher than what you're normally doing, but do that consistently and it pays off.
Yeah.
So,
and again, that's another one that tells, you know, kind of goes against these gigantic shifts, right? So if you went from no exercise to P90X overnight, you cannot. It's like 120% beyond, and people can't sustain that. They quit. They end up just kind of make excuses on why they can't do it. But if we just went up a little bit, and this is why I guess in our clinic and in your coaching, we focus so much on just small habit changes, because we know in the long term, if we're patient and we're resilient and we have the vision, the long term delay gratification to see it that way, you're going to get where you want to be if you're just consistent with it.
Yep. And so we'll go into the next part, which is honesty. So if we truly want to change for good, we have to be honest with ourselves and with, you know, people around us and about our situation. We have to know what we want. So we have to be honest about what we want to accomplish, why we want to accomplish it, and who we want to become, right? So what we want to accomplish is kind of our goals. You could say that those are kind of outcome goals, but who we want to become, and we may have talked about this before, but it's identity-based goals. So if you want to be a healthy person, and I have a whole episode for this, but if you want to become a healthy person, then you have to adopt the habits of healthy people. So if you want to, you know, be lean and muscular, then you probably need to do what lean and muscular people do, which is, you know, eat healthy, work out, you know, manage stress, all those things. So the best goals to set are ones that are based on changing your identity, because those are the ways that you kind of help visualize that future. Whereas kind of outcome goals are, if you think of it like a carrot on a stick, once you get the carrot, what's going to keep you moving? Right. And so there are different types of goals to set. And identity goals are the strongest as far as motivating people long term.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because so this is the difference between someone saying, I need to lose 10 pounds for a wedding dress. So that's the carrot. And once they get the 10 pounds for the wedding dress, they kind of just go back to what they were doing before. And of course, the 10 pounds just come right back, versus identifying yourself as, you know what, I'm going to be a healthy, lean, vibrant person. Therefore, I need to do X to make sure I become that person. in the future. And again, this is more long-term, this is more stable because again, you're looking at what you're becoming versus just reaching to a sugar A1C goal or a cholesterol goal or something like that.
Yeah, it's so I'm reading a book right now called Hidden Potential, and it's written by Adam Grant, and he says that's the difference between ambition and aspiration. So ambition is the goal that you're wanting to accomplish. It's the goal you're trying to get to, but aspiration is the person that you're trying to become. And so it's the difference between your ambitions and your aspirations. Like what are you trying to do? Who are you trying to be?
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. And again, this is actually really, really helpful because again, for all people who are listening, who are kind of in the same boat, they're like, I want to, focus on weight loss. What we're telling you is not so much focusing on the weight loss on the scale,
correct,
but changing your person to become a healthier person,
correct,
which then changes your habits.
Yes. Like if you work on that, the weight on the scale will change and it will get where you want it to be. But if you just focus on the number, it's just a number, and numbers can be really deceiving. So, and then I wanted to talk about two things that we do that are kind of frustrating. But one is that we tend to be overconfident about how easy it will be to be disciplined. So we think, oh, I can do this, this diet that is a complete overhaul of everything. I can stick to this 9-week workout program that has me working out 7 days a week and doing these specific exercise. Like we look at something that it looks good and we say, yeah, we can do that. But we need to be honest with our abilities, with our ability, because if we're going from nothing, we're not going to be able to do that because we just don't have that, starting from scratch. And so we need to be honest about our approach to things. But simultaneously, we're overconfident in our ability to be disciplined, but we're also remarkable in our ability to ignore our own failures. And it's not necessarily our failures as in our lack of willpower and stuff like that, but like, let's say from a dietary approach, you try a specific diet and you lose weight on it, but it doesn't stick because it was never going to stick. It wasn't something that was easy. It wasn't something that you enjoyed. You just did it to lose the weight. And then when you got off of it, you gained the weight back. We'll go right back to that diet. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, like, oh yeah, I know what works for me. It's this diet. And I lost 40 pounds on it last time I did it. But I just got away from it and regained the 40 pounds. And I said, well, maybe you should try a different approach. Can you give me the definition of insanity?
That is fascinating. And you're exactly right. Most of the times, a lot of our patients might not want to talk to our coaches because they're like, it's easy. I can do this. I don't need that help. Except they've done it 4 times and they've failed 4 times. And so you're kind of like, we might need to try a different approach. We have coaches. They're free. They're a part of the clinic. They're a tool that can really help us kind of change who we are. But you're right. Our mindset either is like, oh, it's easy. I did it last time. But then it keeps coming back. So you're right. So we're like, we have to try something different. Otherwise, we're just going to keep yo-yoing over and over and over. Yeah,
and we talked about why yo-yoing is just horrible for you.
Right.
It puts you in a worse position than when you started.
Yes.
And so you didn't give me the definition of insanity, so I'll go ahead and read it. And this is a quote that's attributed to Einstein, but I don't think that he actually said it.
I've heard the same thing.
But it's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So if you did it last time and you lost 40 pounds and then you got off of it and regained it, doing it again is going to give you the exact same results. Unless it is, unless something about that process or about your mindset changes and it becomes a long-term thing, it's not going to stick just like it didn't stick last time. And so we need to be honest about, what was successful last time and what failed, and what can we do differently to change the outcome, even if we take a similar approach. Okay.
That's awesome. And I'm glad you had this honest section because, again, we don't know what we are until we're honest with ourselves, right?
Right.
And so even with, sometimes we'll have people track their food, or the whole point is not so much to point out all your failures, but it's just kind of see where you are. And because you also need to realize, what have you done? What have you not done? And if you're honest about, that it didn't really work, that's actually growth. That's actually okay, you know what? We did it last time. I've done it this way 4 times. It hadn't worked any time. Maybe honestly, we need to try something different. And that's actually the beginning of, that was a challenge. We're not doing it the right way. We need to try something different.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to start making some real change, we have to start being honest and being able to be honest with ourselves consistently and not be afraid of, failure and seeing failure as a learning experience, and that's one of the things that people that are in that 5%, they're good at. They've learned how to, interpret failure, not as a stopping point, but as a launching point for the next effort. So I want to go through a couple things real quick. So one of the methods of coaching that I've been trained in is cognitive behavioral therapy. And there is a readiness for change kind of model, right? And so I just wanted to go through each one of those real quick so that people can kind of put themselves in a category and know where they are and kind of what they need to go to the next level, right?
Yeah.
And so for this model, number one is pre-contemplation. So pre-contemplation means that there is no intention to make any changes right now, whether it's you may not even be aware that there is a problem to fix, or you're in denial that your behaviors or where you are in life is a problem, or you aren't knowledgeable about the problem to see it as a problem, right? So either way you go, you don't see a problem, you don't have a reason to fix it, you're not planning on doing anything, right? And so the first step there is, being honest and talking with people and going to see your doctor and, figuring out where you need to go. And then the next level is contemplation. And that means that you've identified that there is a problem, right? First step to fixing a problem is acknowledging that one exists. And these people they know it's a problem, but they haven't really decided if they want to do anything about it. They're kind of weighing the pros and cons of, do I want to do something about it or not? What are the benefits of making some changes? What are the negatives? And so something that you can do if you're in that stage where you know that there's a problem, you're not really sure what to do about it, is ask yourself, why do you want to change? And so there's this concept of finding your why. And that is a practice of exploring underlying motivations. And right. So there's an exercise that you can do for that. I've heard it referred to as the 5 whys or the 4 whys, however many whys. But the idea is to say, okay, let's do it since we're talking about weight loss, the concept of weight loss. Why do you want to lose weight? Or what do you want? I want to lose 30 pounds. Well, why do you want to lose 30 pounds? Because I'm overweight. Why is being overweight a negative in your opinion? Well, because I have lower energy levels, my joints hurt, I don't get around as well. Okay. Why is that important to you? Well, because I want to be able to keep up with my kids or my grandkids, and I want to be able to experience life with them. So it's not, you want to lose 30 pounds, not because the number, like the number on the scale it means nothing. It's just a number. What you want is a better life. What you want is more comfortable time and enjoyment with your grandkids or your kids. So your family is your underlying motivation. That's why you're doing it. Yeah. And it takes some, thought and just kind of continuing to ask yourself why in response to that first question to get to those underlying motivations. And once you have that, you're much better off at actually setting some goals and kind of figuring out where to go, because that purpose is what can drive you further than a number can.
Yeah. Awesome. No, and I think this is helpful because if you don't have a problem, you're not going to do anything to change it, right?
Right.
But if you do realize, this is a problem, you do need to figure out why you want to change that problem, because that can make it much more successful versus just another kind of yo-yo failed attempt that we're doing.
Yeah. And so another thing to do is when you're thinking about why you want to change, then think, okay, are there any barriers that would make change difficult? And what can you do about that? How can you address those barriers? And then another one is, what are some resources or what are some things that you could do or get or people that you could get in contact with that could make that change easier and more possible, right? So this is all kind of preparing, doing a lot of thinking on what it is that you want to do. And then you move into preparation. And most people that are probably listening to the podcast are in this stage or the next one. And so preparation is where you're aware of the problem, you want to change, but you still need to get ready. So you're putting all the parts of the plan down, and you're making your plan, you're gathering information, you're writing down all your motivations, you're writing down some goals that you've set for yourself, and you're making contact with your doctor or your wellness coach or friends or church family or whoever it is that's your social support. You're getting them on board and letting them know like, hey, I'm ready to make some changes.
Right.
And then the next stage is action, and that's just where you're doing the things. You're taking all the information that you've gathered, you've got your motivations, you've got your plan, and then you put it into practice. You start doing some stuff.
Yeah, and I think when people are watching this and they're listening to this model, so much action needs to happen before action needs to happen, right? So a lot of people will jump straight to action, and because they don't know really why they're doing it, they're trying to look for a scale number, they don't really know what they're doing. They might just find something on Instagram, they're going to try it. That's why, or a supplement they're going to buy, whatever. That's why there's so much like yo-yoing going on. But if you do it in this order that you just mentioned, where you really focus a lot on the preparation part of it before the action part, your chance of success will be in the 5% versus the 95%.
And that's not to say that action before you've completed all those, previous steps is not worth doing. Like you can start with some things like, people in the preparation stage might even already be making some small changes, right? Things that are kind of generally known as healthy things to do, like, going for a walk or something. So they're not supremely tailored for specific goals, but they're generally good things to be doing. So you're making some small steps in that direction. But action is where, you really start to hammer in the detailed things and really start to focus on those goals. So you can get started on some things that are good for you to do, while you're still trying to figure out the deeper levels of motivation and kind of ironing out the goals and what it's going to look like. So don't not do anything. Don't put things off that you could be doing now because you don't have the perfect plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
We call it, so in healthcare, we have things that are called parachutes, right? So parachutes are things that you don't have to have a lot of studies, they're good. Right? So like, your chance of jumping on an airplane, parachute's going to save you. You don't have to test that. So right, like things like going to bed earlier on time, drinking more water, things like walking around, more, being more active, getting off your screens. Like those are just basic things that we have plenty of data. There's almost no negative in those things.
Right.
So as you're prepping for bigger, more concrete life changes, those are the ones you can definitely already start without having to, plan so much for it.
Yeah. Kind of universal versus the individualized, tailored change.
Yeah.
And so one thing about the action phase is that trial and error is the game. You're going to try some things and they're going to work great. And then you're going to try some things that don't work. And, the thing to do is to congratulate yourself for any good things that you do, any small changes you make, any wins. Get good at recognizing wins and celebrating them. And again, looking at failures as teaching moments, because every failure comes with more knowledge of what didn't work, so you know what to do differently next time, right? So if you can celebrate small wins, regardless of how small they are, do the exercise of looking at every situation and trying to find some positive out of it. And that's the idea behind failure as a learning experience. Like, you had a failure point. That was inevitable because we're not perfect.
Right.
But what's the positive? Oh, well, now I have more knowledge about what I was doing and how I could do it differently to be more successful. And so people in the 5% are really good at doing that. So once you have changed everything and you've met your goals, you're in maintenance phase. And maintenance phase is all about just doing what you've been doing, keeping the good habits in place, keeping the bad habits at bay, and trying to just maintain for the rest of your life. And then the next stage is relapse, and relapse can occur anywhere. So it doesn't have to go in a linear order. And all of these, you could be in action and then go back into, preparation based on what happens, right? So you can ping pong back and forth between these stages at any given time. But relapse is going to be inevitable. We're always going to have that just means that you have fallen back into a bad habit or a bad routine or something, and we need to redirect. And so what you do when you do that is you figure out, which stage you need to go back to, and then pick right back up. So let me see. I have a thing here. The key is to not let the setbacks undermine your self-confidence and prevent you from getting back in the game. And so quitting is the only form of true failure. So as long as you don't quit, you're not totally failed. You're still winning.
Absolutely. Well, and again, I think we always, I talk to a lot of patients, and they'll say things, well, I fell off the wagon. Okay. But in real life, if you fell off the wagon, how long are you going to lay on the floor? You know, like, I mean, think, back in the day, if you ride on a wagon, you fall off the wagon, most people realize, ouch, that hurts. I need to get back up. I can't just lay here forever. But sometimes our mind psychology kind of plays that role, right? Like, well, I'm just fell off the wagon in, September, it's Christmas next week. I might as well just wait until, January. And like I said, as long as you don't quit, you're okay. The key is to get back up. And then learn. Like I said, the failures are the opportunities to learn. Like, what didn't happen? What didn't I do? Maybe now, I got to get rid of the Oreos from the pantry because that thing's just way too tempting. Things like that. Oh, maybe I do need to avoid the kitchen in the office because they always have snack foods in there. So you learn that, okay, that was a failure point. Let me change some things and we'll go back to it. And as long as you're doing that, we call it process improvement. As long as you're constantly in process of improving, you're going to be okay. But the moment if you kind of get down on yourself, you quit, that's when we end up being back to where we started.
Back to the drawing board. And so now we'll shift into, I know we've talked about this or mentioned it, just positive outlook, the power of just thinking positively. And that's how you can get yourself to view failure as a win or celebrate small wins and recognize them. Your how you think about yourself and about your life and about the world affects how it is. And so if you have positive expectations, you're more likely to experience positive things. And I think about a movie, right? If you read reviews online saying, this movie is so bad, you're going to have preconceived notions about it. When you go see it, you're going to be looking for all the reasons that people say that it's terrible. And you may have gone to see it with no expectations and absolutely loved it. And I've done that before where I watched a movie and I was like, dude, that movie was great. And I can tell you like 15 reasons why I loved it. But then you go online and everybody's like, this movie was just garbage and this is the reason, blah, blah, blah. And we have a tendency to go with the group. And so we will, instead of just enjoying the movie for what it was and how it, made us feel, then we start to second guess ourselves and, maybe that movie wasn't that good, but we need to get better about doing that. But going into it without negative expectations to bias us in that direction. And we see a lot more positives. And that applies to like everything in life. And so positive expectations can generate positive feelings. They can have a host of physiological benefits, such as alleviating stress, reducing blood pressure, and can make a big difference in what we have next. And so I want to talk about the power of the mind over the body, because what we believe can have a direct impact on our physiology. And so I want you to explain something to me, and I want you to talk about the placebo effect.
So the placebo effect is actually really, really fascinating. There's two ways to see it, but the big one is if people feel like they're doing something or taking something, it can actually affect their outcome. And so this was actually demonstrated a lot in medicines for anxiety and depression. So we call them SSRIs. So if you look at an SSRI, if people take it, they have about a 40% chance of that medicine actually helping. But if I give them a sugar pill and I'm telling them it's the same thing, they have about 30% chance that's working, right? Doesn't make any sense because there's no physiological component of the sugar pill that should do anything. But just the fact that the mind feels like, oh, this should help me, it helps them. Right. And so on the flip side, there's something called nocebo effect, which means that if you feel like it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Right. And so same thing, there's a medicine that might work, but if you tell them this medicine is not going to work, or you use negative language for the patient, instantly they're going to call back and say it didn't work, and so it's very, very fascinating on how powerful the mind is, but it absolutely can change physiological outcomes.
What's interesting? With placebo, the idea is that they don't know that they're getting a sugar pill.
Right.
But there was a study on what happens if you tell them you're giving them a sugar pill, and they still see about 50% of the benefit of the actual medicine.
Yeah.
Even though they know it's not real, it's the act of taking the medication triggers the response in the brain to produce physiological effects.
Yeah.
It's wild.
It is. And again, with what you're saying, the positive outlook, this is kind of like the glass half empty versus the glass half full people. I mean, we have data that glass half full people live longer.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, these things, it's so funny because it sounds cuckoo that your brain makes this much impact on your health, but it absolutely does in every single facet, from sleep, exercise, nutrition, outlook, depression, anxiety. How you view things drastically changes how your outcomes are.
Yeah. And that's why I dedicated an entire episode to this topic, because it is that important. And so to end on the placebo effect, what we think we're capable of is crucial when it comes to behavioral change. Yeah. Because if we believe that we can, we will.
Yeah.
Perfect. If you believe that you can't, you won't.
Right.
And so that is called self-efficacy. And so self-efficacy is an individual's belief in their capacity to act in ways that are necessary to reach specific goals. So if you believe you have the power to make choices that can affect your situations and your outcomes in life, and you can master things and be competent, like, you are more likely to do that. You have to believe in yourself and your abilities to do things. It requires a little bit of honesty, but you have to truly believe that you are capable of making change, and then you can make change. And so, just like you said, people that have a more optimistic outlook, the glass half full, they have greater confidence in their ability, and they're more likely to engage in healthy behaviors, which, the more you engage in healthy behaviors, the more positive health outcomes you have, and your quality of life improves. So all of those reasons are why people with optimistic outlook and high levels of self-efficacy live longer and have, happier lives. Yeah. So we need to get there. And so how do we get there?
Practice
and
consistency.
Right. Yeah. So engage in mastery experiences. So taking on challenges, doing things that, challenge you to get better at doing something, and then doing that repeatedly. As we do things that are challenging, or, you can say doing hard things, we learn that we are much better at doing hard things, and that just kind of keeps going. Yeah. So the more we win, the more we win. And
perfect.
Yeah. So another way is to see somebody else that you view as similar to you succeeding. Yeah. And so this ties in with the social thing, but if you can find a partner that is willing to go through these things with you, and you see them succeed, it makes you believe like you can succeed too. And they've actually demonstrated that in studies of testing. Yeah. But it only applies if you view yourself on the same level as somebody. If you view somebody as being like superior and, just on another level, and they succeed, it can actually make it worse for you. Yeah. You have to pair yourself with people that are kind of on the same level. But yeah, seeing somebody else succeed can help you succeed.
Yeah. And again, this is why it's so important who you surround yourself with, right? And so you're surrounding yourself with people with your same age group, same kind of similar capabilities, but they're improving. Most people will automatically start improving as well. But right, if you surround yourself with pessimists, it can be difficult, right? Because everything is negative and everything is horrible. And you can see that even with work and coworkers and things like that. Okay.
And so we still have a little bit to go.
Okay.
So the practice of doing hard things and doing mastery experiences, you're going to have failures. Yeah. Sometimes you're going to do something and it's not going to work out. Yeah. And that's uncomfortable. And that's why we tend to not do those things. But so if we want to make change, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. And I wanted to, we talked about it, change being uncomfortable. But part of changing for good is going to be breaking down bad habits, getting rid of them, and then building new habits. And there's a term for that I'm just recently familiar with, and it's called positive disintegration.
Okay.
Where we're basically breaking down the parts of ourselves that we don't want to carry forward with us, getting rid of them, and then replacing them with new things that are better. And we move forward as a better person, like more progress, right?
Yeah.
And so positive disintegration. And that whole process is super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so we just need to get comfortable being uncomfortable if you want to change. And I have a TED Talk that I want to link in the show notes.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I ran across this TED Talk in a book that I read recently. But I watched this TED Talk probably 15 years ago when I started losing weight. Okay. And it changed my life. And what it is it's a guy named Jia Zhang. Okay. He's a Chinese immigrant, I believe, an entrepreneur. And he was struggling with success because he was afraid of rejection. So afraid of failing to make connections. And he just was so terrified of rejection. So he read about exposure therapy. And he developed this YouTube channel where he basically made video blogs of his experiences. And he would just write down, he had like a list of 100 things that he was just going to go out and do. Yeah. And some of them were just off the wall. So like the very first one was he just walked up to a stranger and asked him if he could borrow $100. And and the guy was like, no, why? And he got so scared that he ran off. And he videotaped the whole thing. And when he watched it back, he was like, I was so scared, but the guy was not threatening at all. And then he asked why. And he's like, I realized I missed an opportunity. I could have just negotiated maybe and left with something. And then the second one was like asking for a burger refill at McDonald's. Like they don't do that if you didn't know. But it's like putting yourself in situations where you know what the outcome's going to be, but you're still approaching the person and then asking for something you know you're going to get told no. And if you get comfortable doing that and you get over that fear of rejection, you'd be surprised at how often people will just say yes. It's like he went to Starbucks and asked if he could be a Starbucks greeter. And the manager was like, what is that? And he goes, well, you know the greeters at Walmart that just say hello to you when you come in? It's like, can I do that? And the manager was hesitant. And he said, is that weird? And the manager's like, yeah, it's kind of weird. And he's like, but when I called out the feeling that he was having, he was open to it. So I had sat there for like 3 hours greeting people at Starbucks. It was super boring, but I did it anyway. Just things like that, just practicing putting yourself into uncomfortable situations and learning that, there's not really anything to be afraid of. It can really help build up your immunity to that fear of failure. And one other thing, and I know that the episode releases are kind of off the calendar. And so this one won't come out for a couple of weeks, but Thursday is Thanksgiving. And I just wanted to add a little section here at the end about gratitude. Because we're talking about positive mindset. And, there are many, many studies that show the benefits to a positive mindset and improving mood and just putting yourself into a good spot, by being thankful, being grateful, showing some gratitude. It's something that we all need to be better about.
Absolutely. We have actually, from a scientific standpoint, gratitude journaling, that's a big one. We actually have shown that we can improve heart function, literally on echocardiogram. Like you put an echo on, you're like, oh, look, their function has improved over the past couple of weeks because they've been focusing on being thankful for things. And again, it's so funny because the mindset piece is so big. We talked about, we spent the first 6 weeks talking about energy in and energy out and all these things. But if the mind's not right, we can't get that. We can't get there.
I think at the end of part 1, I made the comment, all of this information is great, but it's absolutely useless if you don't do something with it. And so that's why this part 2 is just significantly more important maybe. Because all that stuff, once you get your mind right, you kind of understand the basics from part 1. That part 1 is easy. Part 2 is where the work is done.
Absolutely. And again, viewing challenges, even being grateful for challenges and grateful for hardships and grateful for failure so you can learn. These things change outlook and it helps you be able to sustain, right? Because again, we're trying to make lifelong, we wanted to know 10 years from the road that since you started this journey, that you're definitely in a better spot than you were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Not even 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, or 6 months ago, but 10 years, that's our view. And so to be able to do that, whatever habit we're trying to change consistently, being grateful is a huge piece of it.
Yeah. And what you just talked about, thinking about where you were 10 years ago and being grateful for where you are now, I actually read about that yesterday. And there's it's a concept called mental time traveling, I think. And it's a good thing to do if you find yourself kind of in a rut, or if progress slows, or if you feel like, things are not moving in the right direction. You kind of feel like a failure in those moments, but think back, where you started and look at how far you've come.
Yeah.
And it really puts things into perspective. Just because you have one speed bump in front of you right now doesn't mean that you've not overcome a dozen or more.
Absolutely.
You can. You just, remember where you started. You've come a long way, and be, thank yourself for the positive changes that you made, because, being grateful isn't just to the things other people do for you or the ways that they impact your life. Thank yourself. And that's I had three exercises you can do to practice gratitude.
Okay. Yeah.
And one of them is just waking up in the morning and looking yourself in the mirror and saying thank you for something positive you did yesterday. If you succeeded in doing a healthy habit that you were, trying to work on, just tell yourself thank you for doing that, because it's, it definitely helps. And you're seeing yourself, you're saying thank you. It has the same kind of effect in the brain that saying thank you to somebody else has, and just puts you in a positive mood. Number 2 is, like you said, a gratitude journal. And so when you get up in the morning, just write down 3 things that you're thankful for. I do that almost every day. I probably should be better at doing it every day, but, I do it fairly often. It helps. It definitely does, because it puts things into perspective. And even when you're having, a rough patch, you can always find something that you are thankful for.
Yeah.
And that helps. And then the last one is just randomly send a text or write a thank you card to somebody that's, a part of your life that maybe you haven't talked to. Go up to a coworker and thank them for, their support on a project or their contribution to something that you were working on, whatever. You have to think, what would you feel like if somebody came up to you that you just didn't expect it, and they said thank you for being a good friend or a supportive, coworker, or thank you for your thoughts on this. It just makes you feel so good, right?
Yeah.
So if you just do that for somebody else, the energy that you put out is going to come back to you. And so you're just not only improving your own, positive energy, you're improving those around you.
Yeah.
Gratitude goes a long way.
Absolutely.
And so just to wrap it up for today, make sure that you have a solid understanding of what you want, why you want it, and who you want to become. Identify barriers to change and potential points of failures, and develop a solid plan of action. Maintain positive outlook, celebrate wins, look at failures as opportunities to learn and refine your plan. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, practice gratitude, and never quit.
Dang. Perfect.
Never quit.
Never quit. Yeah. And so that's a perfect wrap up for today's episode. This might be one of the most important episodes we've done in this series.
It's a little bit longer, but it needed to be. I mean, there was so much in it that I could have put in. And so I was keeping it brief, but these are all points that needed to be discussed. And they're kind of the ones that we don't typically discuss a lot. I don't know why. But I have a book recommendation.
Okay, yes.
Coming out of today's episode, which I kind of want to start doing that, because I we talked about that last time. I'm a big reader.
Yeah.
The Mountain Is You by Brianna West.
Yes.
If you are kind of in that pre-contemplation or contemplation stage where you are, or, maybe the preparation stage where you're trying to find that underlying motivation, or there are struggles that you're dealing with that you aren't sure how to overcome, and they're, mental or personal, like The Mountain Is You is phenomenal. The first 2 chapters of that book, I was just so personally attacked, in good ways. And it really challenged me, but it also helped me to understand some of the emotions that we experience when we're, not succeeding, or we feel like we're failing, and reasons that we procrastinate, or why we're scared of certain things. Like it really helped to reframe some of these emotions so you better understood them, and then you can kind of overcome them. And it just breaks it down so well. It's like, if this, then that, if this, then that. And I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
It's such a good book. So if you're in that stage of exploring, the inner you and trying to figure out how to fix that so you can fix the external, can't recommend it enough. Super good book.
Awesome. I think that's the next one in my book is that one.
Yeah,
so
it's good.
For sure. Well, again, Michael, thanks. Today's insight's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And as we always say, if you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section, or shoot an email to, I guess you have the email for the podcast.
Yeah.
What is it?
So commonsensemedicine99@gmail.com.
Got to have that 99.
That's right, man. It's kind of like written by a 14-year-old.
Yeah. That's all right, though.
That's right.
So shoot us an email. Let us know what you think. Give us some feedback. And I'd still love to do a Q&A episode.
I think so, yeah.
That would be great. But we will catch you all next time.
All right. Thanks.
Happy Thanksgiving.